The speeds that elite runners can run a marathon to most of us just seems inhuman. We'd be lucky to be able to hold their pace for a mile or even a kilometre, but they're able to hold it almost effortlessly over the entire race distance. Yes, they have good raw talent and good genetics, but the majority of their abilities just come from training. They focus on improving three pretty basic concepts that I'm going to break down in this video. So by the end, you'll know exactly why they're faster than you and what you can do about it. So if you've hit a plateau in your running and just can't seem to get any faster, understanding what these three things are and how we can improve them will help you to smash through that glass ceiling and run faster and make those elite runners seem a little more human. For those of you that are new here, I'm Russ. I've run 2:43 at the marathon at Sydney last year, and I'm going sub 2:40 at the Gold Coast and Sydney marathons this year. Follow me on Strava if you want even more running inspiration and insight into my training. Today, we're going to cover VO₂ Max, Lactate Threshold, and running economy. And we'll break down what they are, to what level the elites are at, and how you can get your levels closer to theirs. Okay, so VO₂ Max, what is it? Well, VO₂ Max is your body's ability to take oxygen, deliver it, and actually use it. So the more efficient the cardiovascular and respiratory system in delivering oxygen to our muscles, the better. So that's your heart, blood vessels, all working with your lungs to bring oxygen, get it to the muscles as quickly as possible, and remove all that carbon dioxide in the process. So how's that linked to performance? Well, the best analogy I've heard is to think of it as the capacity of your engine. So the bigger the VO₂ max, the more raw horsepower that you have. Now, your VO₂ max level is partly genetic, but it's far from being fixed. You can improve your VO₂ max actually pretty simply. But the problem is that you need to push pretty hard, do it often enough, and be very specific to do it. And the way that you do it is by doing speed sessions. So specifically intervals or high intensity sessions, they're the most effective that get your heart rate really, really high. But if you've got a big training load, these sessions can really, really take it out of you. So ideally, you want to do it twice a week to see bigger improvements, but they're difficult to recover from. So it's important to find that balance. My favorite sessions are 6 to 8 reps of 1 kilometer repeats, all out, literally holding nothing back. Give yourself a minute or two to recover depending on your level, but you want to be doing lung busting work. So that come the end of the session, you're bent over, exhausted, and completely gasping for air. Well, let's look at an example. Eliud Kipchoge, widely regarded as one of the best and most famous marathon runners of all time. Now, he's got a rumoured VO₂ max of between 78 and 84, which means that he can use 78 to 84 millilitres of oxygen per kilogram of body weight every minute when he's working at his maximum effort. Now, these figures aren't publicly available figures, by the way. He doesn't just like release them. There's lots of analysis that's been done by people who are much cleverer than me, and they use real specific data points to give us that rough ballpark. But if you compare his level to different types of marathon runners, you can see that the higher the VO₂ max, the faster the marathon times. Well, his VO₂ max alone doesn't actually predict his dominance, because there's some other athletes that have even higher levels than he does. But what sets him apart is how much of that VO₂ max he can use for long periods. His lactate threshold and his running economy are just off the charts. So a high VO₂ max, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can run a fast marathon, but it gives you that raw potential too. But you need to combine that with a high lactate threshold and good running economy to give you the endurance, not just the pace. And that might be one of the reasons of why you've hit that ceiling and you're not able to get any faster. What your lactate threshold is the level of intensity that you can sustain before lactate builds up faster than your body can clear it. And once that lactate starts to accumulate in high proportions, it leads to fatigue setting in. And that's ultimately what slows you down. So it's really important to understand that as a distance runner, because it tells you how fast you can run without burning out, and actually gives you more of an accurate indication of your race success than VO₂ max will. Going back to the car analogy earlier, if VO₂ max is the capacity of the engine, lactate threshold is essentially your red line. So that's how long you can hold it in top gear without the engine overheating. And if you rev the car too high for too long, it will start to smoke and eventually just blow up. And that's exactly what happens to us. So a beginner runner, they might hit their lactate threshold, in this example, at 60 mile an hour, and a well-trained runner at maybe 70, and an elite runner at 80. Now, everyone is capable of driving at 90 mile an hour, and that's their VO₂ max. But not everyone will be able to hold that pace all the way without the engine overheating. So if you improve your lactate threshold, it's like upgrading your car's cooling system because it allows you to drive faster for longer without breaking down. Now, the best ways to improve your lactate threshold, that's by running at tempo. Longer, more sustained efforts where you're pushing yourself to a comfortably uncomfortable pace. That's the sweet spot. And where it's difficult to talk, but not impossible in short sentences. So we're talking between maybe like 10K, half marathon pace, probably a little bit closer to half marathon pace for good runners. But some good examples of sessions would be 30 minutes at tempo pace, or doing a progressive run where you do the last 20, 25 minutes at tempo pace. It's at this point in the video that I ask you to like and subscribe if you feel as though you're getting some value from it. My content is getting much bigger, much quicker than I was expecting, and I have you guys to thank for that. So drop in the comments if you've hit a plateau, and as a thank you, I'll respond with how I think it is that you can push on to that next level. Well, nowadays your smartwatch is actually really good at figuring out your threshold pace and heart rate. But of course, if you want to get that really accurate measurement alongside your VO₂ max, if you go to a sports lab, you can run on a treadmill, get yourself hooked up to an oxygen monitoring mask, and that will give you the most accurate reading. It's probably a little bit overkill at our level. If you're sub-elite or wanting to go elite, then you want to get these levels measured, but the reality is that your watch is probably good enough for us at this stage. Going back to the principle of it, it's known that in the elite endurance athletes, their lactate threshold occurs at a greater percentage of VO₂ max than amateur runners. And that's because they spent more time training it. But essentially what that means is it allows them to exercise at a higher percentage of their VO₂ max and at faster speeds and higher power outputs. And that is where Kipchoge excels. So his estimated lactate threshold, that's rumored to occur about 85 to 90% of his VO₂ max, which is unbelievably high. And that means that he can run at a pace of between 250 and 255 a kilometer. So 4 minute 34 or 4 minute 42 a mile, while still being under his lactate threshold. So he's not building up any lactate and fatigue when he's running that fast, which is why it makes it look so easy. Now, in practical terms, his threshold pace is nearly identical to his marathon pace. Now, if we compare that lactate threshold across different standards of runners, you can see that the percentage of VO₂ max at which point lactate threshold kicks in is higher the faster that you are, which basically means that your lactate threshold pace is relatively closer to your marathon pace. So VO₂ max is the size of your engine and its capacity. Lactate threshold is how long you can hold it in that top gear without overheating. The final piece of the jigsaw for why you might not be getting faster is because of how fuel efficient your engine is. And in this case, that's your running economy. Your running economy, it reflects how efficiently your body uses energy whilst running. So the lower the cost of using the oxygen at a particular speed, the better running economy that you have. VO₂ max and lactate threshold, they're like direct physiological limits. But when we come up to running economy, it's more multifactored, influenced by things like strength, biomechanics, and equipment. But it is equally important to performance, but less straightforward for us to measure and improve. So it's not just as easily standardized or isolated compared to the other two. So it's a little bit more mythical. But what we do know is that by improving your strength and running form, we can make ourselves more economical. So doing at least one, ideally 2 strength sessions a week, focusing on single leg exercises. Remember, running's a single legged sport. That's the recommendation. And we want to be lifting heavy weights between 6 and 8 reps across 3 sets. But alongside that, you want to be focusing on your biomechanics, like your cadence. And that's where you want to be aiming between 175 to 185 steps per minute. And that will make sure that you're not overstriding, causing that braking motion in your running form. That's just 2 examples of how you can improve it. Also, actually selecting the right running shoes, that can have a real big effect on your running economy. So think of super shoes. That's the equivalent of pumping your tires up to the max. So making it less effort to push the car forward instead of driving with a flat tire. And those carbon plates in your shoes, they help push you forward and they give you that spring. Now, we've seen marathon times come tumbling down over the last 3, 4, 5 years since they were invented. But marathon runners haven't actually necessarily improved their lactate thresholds or VO₂ maxes. You'd probably say that their running economy is improved by using those super shoes, which has sped them up. So think of VO₂ max like the size of your car's engine. A bigger engine can generate more power, but how efficiently you drive it, so in this case your running economy, and how long you can stay in top gear, so your lactate threshold, they matter just as much, if not more. If we think about Formula One cars, they've got small engines, but they're so heavily optimized in their economy and their ability to drive fast for long periods of time. So we want to be applying those same principles to help us continually improve our times instead of reaching a plateau and not being able to get over it. Now, a small subnote to all this is our mental restrictor, which stops you from overexerting yourself and getting injured. Have you heard those stories of people doing superhuman things like, I don't know, a mother lifting a parked car to get to their child? Now, it might seem like a bit of a myth, but the reality is that we are actually more capable than what our body will sometimes allow. So your brain, that will automatically get you to slow down because it knows that by going that little bit harder, it risks causing more damage than the situation deserves. So if you think about your last mile or kilometer of your marathon, your mind will be telling you to stop, but your body will be wanting to go on. And that will be where it's restricting it from what it'll be fully capable of doing to prevent it from causing any further damage. But you can bet that if you had a lion chasing you over that same stretch, your brain would allow you to push that bit harder. And we can train that ourselves to a degree, but to overcome that restriction, make it more familiar. Put yourselves in that pain cave that little bit more often. I'd love to hear from anyone in the comments who feels like they've hit that ceiling in their running, to try and help see if we can get them to smash their next race. You can also check out some of my other videos here, which will give you even more tips on how you can become a better, faster runner. Ta-ra!